Hi, this is Tyreen Martinson, and this is week 2 of my 52-week vlogging challenge that I plan to take all the way through this year as I learn to create a decent blog, or at least a vlog that people would like to come and see. So if you are new to vlogging or you're an independent writer who would like to start a vlog, you get to see how it's done from a very rough start to what I hope will be a vlogging channel that people actually come to. So we'll see how it goes. Each week, I'm hoping to implement one small change to make the vlog a little bit better. So this week, instead of going completely off the cuff like I did in my first just start video, which I had to create because if I don't have a just start video, I have a tendency or just start doing the thing, entry into things, I won't start. My fear has totally hurt me in the past, and I will think of doing something and think of doing something and brainstorm and create lists and do research, and then I won't start because I freeze. And so last week's video, my first video was my just start video. It was my way of pushing myself past that freeze point and just getting going. So that video, I didn't even have a plan with it. I didn't have notes. I literally just propped my phone up on my laptop with this almost this exact view and started. So one small change is I actually have a plan next to me on my computer screen about what I'm going to talk about today. And the second small change is that last week I said I wasn't sure what I wanted to name this vlog. And I decided that I was going to go with Truth About Storytelling. Now, I don't know if that encapsulates everything I want to talk about, but I hope it gives everyone a sense of what I'm going to be talking about because I love reading, I love writing, I love making up song lyrics, I like singing, and I think singing and music encapsulate a type of storytelling that's a little different than the prose storytelling that we get when we read books and watch movies. So I like storytelling in all format, and I'm going to talk about how we go about storytelling or telling stories to each other. And I want to talk about the process of writing and what it takes to be an indie or hybrid author, because that's what I am. I'm a hybrid author. And by that I mean I've had short stories, poems, and articles published in anthologies and magazines, while most of my longer fiction is stuff that I have independently published on purpose. So I have about, I don't know, I think 16 books out. And then I have a bunch of Kindle Vella serializations. And I know a lot of people are shocked when they find out that I don't really know exactly how many books I have out. It's partly because I have one book out with a small press that things didn't go well. And but I actually prefer my own independent publishing efforts for the books that I have out. Although again, I've been featured in some anthologies that have been highly professional and who I've really appreciated what they've done. So I'm an independent hybrid author. That's who I am. I realized I didn't introduce myself very well last time. I have a little bit of a background in teaching, and I have a part-time job that I don't really love, but it's kind of a family responsibility kind of thing. And so I do that, and I volunteer at my church and in my community. So that's a little bit about who I am, but I wanted to start this channel because I care passionately about writing, storytelling, and reading. And also I had hoped to kind of meet the YouTube community a little bit more. I've been out and watched other writing vlog videos, and I think it's fascinating to see all the different types of vlogs there are out there for writers. There are the very practical how to do this, this platform or this craft element type of vlogs, and I think those are awesome. I think that I think the vlogs that are all about author community are wonderful, especially those that interview other authors. And I would like to try interviewing other authors at some later date. I am going to make sure that I set things up a little more professionally before I have other authors come and join me on this channel, because I want to make sure that if I'm lifting someone else up, that I'm like really giving them as much of a professional boost as I can. So I admit I am willing to just start with things for me that may be a little rough around the edges. And I mean, as you note, probably from watching this, that there's a little bit of live sound in this room. Doing a vlog in front of a video is not the best for sound quality because the sound echoes off the window. There's also hard floors in the dining room that I'm in, and so that also creates a sound echo. So as I go about doing this vlog, these first 52 weeks, I'm going to be looking for ways I can improve the video and sound quality as I go, and just doing that a little bit at a time. Because even though sometimes it looks like I just jump into things, I have been thinking about this for a while, and I do know that there are steps I need to take to make the video of good quality. So I am considering all those things, but I also know that I'm not the kind of person that just does stuff perfectly right off the bat. And even if I have a plan, it's hard for me to execute that plan again, that perfect kind of way. And so I just have to take one little piece and improve at a time. And that's how I've worked at my writing most of my life. I have written one story at a time. I've written one page at a time. I've written one paragraph at a time. I've written one silly song lyric or poem at a time. And I started doing those things when I was a young child, before I even really realized that I was studying the craft of storytelling and poetry and music lyric writing. I just loved those things from a very young age. I loved to tell stories to my dog and my cat. And I had a hard time telling nonfiction narratives. I was very envious of the fact that most of my family members seemed to be able to tell nonfiction narratives with ease. And they knew the pacing. They knew how to slow down or speed up or lengthen or shorten their sentences for the most dramatic effect. And I was always fascinated by that. And I know when I tried to tell stories about what happened at school, I'd tell things out of order and they'd be messy, and I'd slow down in the wrong parts and speed up in other parts that I should have sped up in. But it was all this interesting, like, learning about storytelling from my parents and my grandparents and from my friends who like to tell stories about their day and about their life, or who like to tell stories about books they read or movies they'd watched. And so all that time, I was going along learning about storytelling without even realizing I was doing it. And so I think sometimes that's kind of come over into my writing life professionally, and even in this vlogging video. I think it's really good to celebrate the small steps that we take to learning about how to do things. And so I'll talk a little bit about that in this vlog too. I'll be talking about storytelling, reading, writing, and taking time to really celebrate each step that we learn in each new way that we do things. So for me, vlogging is new, and I'm going to celebrate these kind of rough start videos because I know that, you know, next week will be different, and the week after that will be different, and I'm going to keep learning and I'm going to keep growing. And yeah, I'm going to make some mistakes, but that's part of the joy of finding a new way to do storytelling. And to me, vlogging is a new way to do storytelling. Even if I'm trying to create something informative, there are storytelling aspects to it. So I hope that you're willing to go along with me for that ride. And I hope that you know that somehow I hope to create eventually better sound quality with the window view behind me, because windows are very important to me in my writing life. And in my writing, I love to write adventure, action, travel, and delving into the fullness of life type of things. Now, in my fiction, it's more action adventure. In my poetry, it's a little bit more delving into the fullness of life. And so there's a little bit of differences there. But there's always this sense of hope on the horizon. And I like it when characters get outside and kind of break out of their shell and find their identity through travel. So, in every one of my books, my characters travel from one place to another, and in that, they discover more about their identity. In my poetry, there's often at least some sense of movement and, again, seeking a deeper uh, hope in the moment. So that's that's kind of what I get into in my writing. And I know that doesn't have a good brand name to it, and I'm gonna talk about branding in this video a lot more in just a few minutes. But there's a reason I have this window here, because to me, seeking hope on the horizon and going places is kind of about getting outside and having a window where I have light, natural light coming into the room and showing me that outside is really important to me as a writer. Now, on the aspect of branding, the window is really important in this video for branding because we have to decide as authors how much of a window, really, really wide or really, really small, are we going to give the world to our writing and our writing lives. And I know as a writer, I have been a little TMI, too much information, on social media at times. And that's definitely come to burn me occasionally. And I don't think I've been too much information about anything bad, but I have definitely, shared life out there. And when I was messaging another author about starting this vlog, she put out these different categories of vloggers, and she said, are you going to do this? You're going to do this? You're going to be a lifestyle vlogger. And I thought, lifestyle vlogger? What kind of lifestyle vlogger would I be? I don't wear the latest fashions or do the coolest things. But then I looked at my social media accounts and I realized, actually, there's a lot of lifestyle stuff on there. And I didn't even really think about it. I do write on my social media a lot about the life of a writer. And so that is going to be coming into this vlog as well, the truth about storytelling, because I'm going to be talking about what it's really like for me as a writer to write. So my author window, my author brand for this vlog is to some extent about the life of a writer, even though that's not the main element in my fiction, nonfiction, or poetry. So I don't know if this is going to be a good basically when I funnel towards my books that I write, but I will be talking about them a little bit. But mainly I'll be talking about the writing that goes into them and the indie authorship life and how that works for me. And I hope when I can interview other authors that I will ask them questions about what inspires them in their writing life. And so again, I will be talking a little bit about the life of a writer even when I interview people. So I guess, yes, I am a little bit of a writing life vlogger with a little bit about what goes into storytelling and talking about a little about the mechanics of that and the mechanics of indie authorship. So yes, as usual, I'm having a hard time narrowing down to this author brand because I hear the word brand and I think of the cows and the sheep that get branded. And I don't know if you've ever seen a cow or sheep branded. I have. I grew up in a farming community and we raised a few cows for beef. And I have seen cows branded. I know that they don't like being branded. I know that, it burns them, right? The brand, the iron brand burns into their skin. It's painful. And when I think about branding, that's what I think about. And I'm like, I have to have an author brand this? Oh, brand. That term just is hard for me. But I finally, after 10 years of being a very eclectic author of fantasy, science fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, I realized that I might need to start narrowing down to an author brand and thinking about what it looks like. What is the core of what I write? What is my author brand? What is the one core element, or what are three core elements that I bring to everything I write? And I can tell you that I like to have a sense of adventure in everything I write. I like to have hope on the horizon in everything I write. And maybe that hope is prevalent in the story, but usually it's at least it's on the horizon. We're looking towards it in the fiction, nonfiction, and poetry that I write. And I also really love to write imaginatively and thoughtfully about things. So those are all parts that come out in my writing. I'm also a Christian, and so my faith comes out in my writing, although sometimes it's very subtle and sometimes it's very uh, very open. It kind of depends on which part, which book that you're reading of mine. I can tell you that usually my nonfiction is more open about my faith, unless it's specifically about writing, and then it's just about writing. And my poetry kind of is a mix. My fiction is some of it's a mix, some of it's been more open, and some of it's been more subtle in the faith aspect. So I need to work on that, honestly, as a writer, which way I'm going to go, how wide my window is going to be that I'm showing people about my faith. And it's kind of what that window really symbolizes. What are we showing people? What window are we giving people to look through when we write? Are we giving them a view of the outdoors and adventure and trees and maybe a little sunshine out there on the horizon? Or are we giving them a dark forest with, really hard elements that maybe there's a little hope at the end? Are we giving them, a murder mystery? Are we giving them romance? And thinking about how we do that as authors, how we brand our books, but how we brand our author public life to support our author brand. It's kind of something I've been thinking about, and I took classes last year at a couple of different writing conferences. There were some great keynote speakers who talked about author branding and who talked about things like that. And I've seen some great vlogs about author branding. I've learned quite a bit about it, and yet I still struggle with it. So I can't say I've got it perfect. If you're on this vlog and you stick around this vlog, you will soon know that I am not about being perfect all the time, because I don't think it's something that's humanly possible to achieve. But also I know in the past that when I was in high school, I was one of those students that stressed myself out about trying to be perfect, and I decided it wasn't worth it. I do want to give writers and readers the best experience they can have when they pick up one of my books. So I'm going to strive for it to be as good as I possibly can get it. But perfection, it's not my thing. I mean, even in the publishing industry standard for grammatical correctness is actually 95%. They're not going for 100% perfection either. So I'm going to try my best to get to 100%, but I'm not going to let my hair fall out or lose sleep if there's a typo that I find. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn from my mistake and move on. And so, because I think learning is a trajectory type of thing. And this idea that people just come out of nowhere and they're perfect at everything is, I think, actually a little toxic to all of us, to anyone who's trying to achieve some kind of creative life or even actually any kind of success. We all know that we need to build on a foundation of growth and learning to get to a successful place. And to say otherwise, to say that I could just show up and be perfect at everything without any growth trajectory, just is just silly, and I won't do it. So I guess that's another part of my author brand, is I am a little transparent about that. I do make mistakes. I don't want to make mistakes, but I do make mistakes, and I know I can learn from them and grow from them. So I hope to depict that in my fiction and nonfiction and poetry too. That's another aspect of what I write. So talking about author branding though, why do we have it? If it's so hard to do, if it's so hard to kind of ignore pieces of ourselves to create a singular author brand, why do we do it? And I think it's because it's for the same reason that when we're scrolling categories on, say, Netflix or Hulu, and we're like, well, what do I want to watch tonight? Do I feel like a comedy? Do I feel like a science fiction fantasy movie? Do I feel like a romance movie? Do I feel like a romantic comedy? Do I want to watch action adventure? Do I want to watch a thriller? And those are the categories that were pretty well given on a streaming service for films, right? And the when we go to a library or a bookstore, or we go to an online platform for finding books, we have a few more categories than those, but they are still pretty limited. We're looking at some big broad categories and then some narrower subcategories. But the reality is, let's say I want to go to a bookstore and I want to read a fantasy novel. I've already decided this when I walked in. I'm like, I think I kind of want to read fantasy action adventure. I wonder who, I'll go to the section that it's in. I won't just, well, that's not true. I love bookstores. I will wander all over the store. Even if I think I'm going to buy a fantasy book, I'll go look at all the other books too, because I love bookstores and I love books and I read in all these different categories. But if I'm really just going to go to look for fantasy and I'm limited on time, usually not something I put a parameter on myself when I'm going to a bookstore. I usually give myself a couple hours, not just 20 minutes. But if I only had 20 minutes, if that was the case, if I only had 20 minutes and I walked into a bookstore and I was like, I really want to find a fantasy adventure book to read, I think I'm going to go to the fantasy science fiction section. And I would go there and I'd be like, okay, so what kind of book am I looking for? Am I kind of looking for a book where there's assassins in it? Or am I going to go look for a book where there's magic? Am I going for a book that's got time travel? Because there's a lot of different subcategories, and certain writers write in those subcategories. I know that they do because I've read their books. Now I'm going to go and look to see what I find. And so I read this book when I was in third grade for the first time, and then I read it again and again and again. I've read it so many times I kind of lost count. I'm in the 20 somethings. So this is A Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I love this book. Now, I own like 3 copies of it, and I could maybe own a fourth. I think I might have a fourth, actually. I have an audiobook too. Yeah, so I have 4 copies of this book. And none of those 4, the first copy I owned, that one fell apart. So I happen to love this book a lot. Now, I'm unlikely to go to the bookstore and buy another copy of it, although, again, I have 4 copies of it. So it could happen. But I might think, I wonder who else writes like Tolkien. And I might think about that, and I might go find another author who writes like Tolkien. Or maybe I think, oh, I really feel like reading Tolkien. I'm going to go and see if there's any books that they have out that I haven't read yet that are by Tolkien. So I'll go and look at his section on the fantasy shelf. So what am I doing? I am looking for the comfort of an author that I know and that style of writing that he produces. So now Tolkien doesn't have that many books out. He passed away many years ago, and there's really a very limited section on the shelf that you can find his books. But I know if I'm looking for one of his books, I know what I'm going to get, right? I know the kind of writing he does. So the same goes for, say, another author I met recently who at an indie author conference, and his name is Craig Martelle. He actually runs the 20 Books to 50K group on Facebook, along with a friend of his named Michael, and who started the group. And he started the 20 Books Vegas Conference for Independent Authors. So he writes, what does he write? He writes sci-fi. You can tell from the cover, right? This is science fiction. He also writes a few other things, but he mainly writes science fiction. And so I know now that I've read one of his books, I kind of know what to expect. It's military sci-fi. If I wanted to read military sci-fi again, I could easily pick up one of his books. He's got many of them out there, right? So I could just find book after book after book if what I wanted to read was military sci-fi. And why would I do that? Why, if after I've read one military sci-fi book, would I want to read another one? Well, I think it's because, well, number one, the adventure continues in the next book, but also because we all like that sense of familiarity. that stories can give us, that sense of refuge, that place that we can go for comfort and entertainment and just a little bit of provocation. But we're there for familiarity and entertainment and comfort. That's why we scroll through our options on our streaming services like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime. We're looking for, I think, I kind of want to watch a comedy tonight, but which one do I want to watch? I'm going to scroll through the options and see, because I need to watch something familiar but a little different. So we do that with books too. We want to read something familiar but a little bit different. So somebody who really loves military sci-fi might read military sci-fi book after military sci-fi book after military sci-fi book, which is why the Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Kobo algorithms, and once they've seen you've read, say 5 or 6 military sci-fi books, they're going to say, oh, people who like this book also liked, and they'll show you a whole bunch more of military sci-fi books. Now I confuse the algorithm as a reader because I read things like The Hobbit and Battleship Leviathan, and I read books like The Eternity Gate. So The Eternity Gate's also fantasy. It's Christian fantasy. It might actually show up in a also with, these two books could kind of be in the same category because they're both written by Christians, and this one is by a dear writer friend of mine who I met at Realm Makers. She is a wonderful, wonderful person. This is her debut novel. It's called The Eternity Gate by Katharine Briggs. I highly recommend you check it out if you like young adult fantasy. Oh, by the way, I also recommend this if you like military sci-fi by Craig Martelle. Great book. Great book. So I'm only going to talk about books that I really love on here. I am not going to be a hater unless something really annoys me, but it's unlikely. So this is a brilliant book. It's a Christian fantasy adventure that it's kind of dark, but there's always hope all the way through it. There's just great character arcs. There's brilliant world building that's done in these short snippets, but it's throughout everything, even the language the characters speak. And I love it. There's just little pieces that always remind you that you are in this alternate, amazing fantasy world. So I read these types of books, right? I read mainly fantasy and sci-fi, but I also read poetry and nonfiction, and I read mysteries, and I read thrillers, and I read historical fiction, and I read romances. So the algorithms are a little like, what do we give her this week? We don't know. What do we put in that also read section? Who knows? Or you might like this, So I do confuse the algorithms a little bit, not only with my writing, but with my reading. And that can be a little bit difficult. But coming back to branding, if I find a Craig Martelle book, it's most likely going to be military science fiction, although he also writes thrillers. If I read a Katharine Briggs book, she's going to have a book coming out next year. It's most likely going to be fantasy adventure, although she might write other things too. I don't know yet. So there's this other example I have here. And this is a book. It's an anthology by a bunch of different authors, but I knew exactly what world it was in. And I thought of all these already familiar storylines that I'd already experienced in the universe that this anthology takes place in when I saw the book. And it was the reason I bought the book, because I was like, oh, I really love that universe. I really love reading and experiencing the entertainment of that universe. And so The Empire Strikes Back, from a certain point of view, is an anthology it's a pretty big anthology by a bunch of authors, and I know a lot about it just from looking at the cover. It's set in the Star Wars universe. It's actually all stories set within the timeline of the movie The Empire Strikes Back, but it's from all these different characters who are lesser known characters in the movies. Or maybe even they weren't named characters. There's the guy in the hallway who saw, Han and Leia kissing. It's his story in the background. So it's a really different anthology, but I enjoyed it thoroughly, and it's in a universe that I'm familiar with. So it had that sense of being familiar, but a little bit different. And then I got to know all these different authors and find out more about their writing, and they're all sci-fi and fantasy authors. So, and I like sci-fi and fantasy books, so it all kind of fits together, right? So I found this at a store, and I didn't find it online, but we think about how the online algorithms work. If it sees that we like these types of things, I'm going to pull these back up again, it's going to keep feeding us these types of things, right? So as an author, if I've written something that looks like this, then my readers are going to expect me to write something like this again. And it becomes my author brand. This is my first book. This is the second or third cover, actually the third cover that I've had on this book. This is one of my home copies because it has this little line down here, but the regular copies don't have that line down there. So this is a proof copy, but yeah, I love this book. I wrote it, and yeah, I made mistakes with it. Yeah, I've had a growth experience with it. Yes, I have fixed those mistakes, by the way. If you upload a copy of it today, it is definitely a better book than it was when it first came out 10 years ago. But I learned a lot with this book, and I still love the characters, and I love the story, and I love the world. But I'm an eclectic kind of writer, and I write in a lot of different worlds and imaginary landscapes, and I also write poetry and nonfiction. So the trouble is that I didn't stay with my author brand from when I started 10 years ago to now. If you go to look up my name on any online website, you'll find out that I've written all these other crazy things, and the algorithm doesn't know what to do with that jumble of stuff. It's really quite a jumble of different things. And again, I love what I've written, but I have to work on that author branding. And again, it's something I'm working on, just like I'm working on this blog. I have to figure it out. How am I going to create a clear path for readers to find that something familiar, but something a little bit different? And so, anyway, I wrote a trilogy. I'm just holding up the first book here, Champion in the Darkness. I wrote a trilogy for this. I'm currently working on Kindovella on another trilogy that's set in the same world, because I'm attempting to get back to giving readers the similar but different experience. So the thing is, between that and the new series that's on Kindovella, I also have Liftoff, which is a science fiction novella, and it's part of the Rayatana series. It's very, very small. It's purposely a novella. I plan to write a series of 5 novellas. Now, I got stalled out after book 2 because I had some interesting feedback that I took far, far too close to my heart. I had some beautiful, wonderful, positive feedback, but I also had some negative feedback, and that negative feedback kind of hurt, and I got frozen. Like I talked about earlier in the video, sometimes I get frozen in fear and I have a hard time starting things. Book 3 has had 5 rewrites, and book 4 and 5 are still in outline format, but they might actually be combined just into book 4. I'm still determining that as I finish this 5th version of book 3, which can be found only on Kindovella at the moment as a serialization. But anyway, I had a lot of fun writing this. This is definitely science fiction. It's space opera. It's full of tropes. It's very spoofy. It's got the Chosen One trope going strong in it. It's about a young woman who basically gets abducted accidentally in the middle of an alien war that comes to Earth. So it's all about what happens to her and how she finds her agency and discovers her place in the universe. This book is about how a young woman discovers her place in her fantasy world as a champion. And this one is about a young woman who finds her place in the galaxy as potentially, maybe, the answer to a prophecy that's been out for a long time. So they both have the Chosen One trope in them. They're both about a young woman finding their place or their destiny in the world that they live in. So obviously, I lean into some pretty common tropes across my writing sometimes. But then, in addition to writing things like that, I've written books of poetry and books of short stories like this one, 25 Impossible Tales of Survivors. Flawed Heroes and Annoyed Villains. It's again science fiction and fantasy, so it does fit within this, right? I'm not showing you any of my poetry books yet. So in addition to those types of things I have self-published, I've also been featured. I also have stories or poems in these books. I have a short story in this one called Sunday Snaps the Stories. It was a really fun anthology to be a part of. I have a poem in the Best of Everyday Poets, and one, and I actually have another copy that's two. So I've written poetry, and this is published about, actually I think it was before my first book came out, so I've had poetry out there in the world for a while. There's a short story in this. This is a local literary magazine that I was glad to have a short story published in, and just this week they published one of my poems online at their website. And so all this stuff all over the internet, my name is like, it's got fantasy and sci-fi and poetry and nonfiction and short fiction. By the way, the short fiction in this one is actually kind of romance. I don't usually write romance, but the one in here is a sweet romance short story. So I don't always write the same thing. And again, this creates a struggle for readers to know what to expect when they see my books, and for the online algorithms at online stores to know what to do with my books. So this year, I'm really trying to focus in on what my brand is. I'm trying to hone in on it, and I've decided to create a couple of pen names to put specific books towards, so that way, hopefully, those pen names have a clear brand and a clear line of for the algorithms to follow. Now, I won't know for sure how successful they are until sometime near the end of next year. So maybe by the end of this vlog series, I will know at the end of my 52-week challenge how well those other author brands are moving and how they're doing. And if so, I will let you know how that goes. One of them is actually still fantasy. It's romantic fantasy. And the other one, the other pen name is actually for some hard-hitting sci-fi. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my poetry yet, except for I think I'm going to keep it under my name. I feel weird writing poetry under a pen name. I tried it, and it just feels strange to me. I don't know why. I've even written some fictional poetry and sci-fi poetry and fantasy poetry, but it feels really odd to me to write poetry under a pen name. I don't mind doing fiction under a pen name, but I do mind doing poetry under a pen name. Don't ask me. It may still be my reluctance to brand, but again, I am discovering what it means to brand as an author and why I need to do it. And I hope that any of this or all of this is helpful or informational to other indie authors. I hope that as I struggle to understand how to create my own author brand, that if you see this video, that it will help you to create your own author brand. And I really thank you if you've watched this all the way to the end. You are awesome. Thank you. And I've created this for Thanksgiving weekend in the United States, so my shirt says grateful. I am very thankful and very grateful for all of you who have come by to watch this video. I am thankful for all the books that I've been able to read in my lifetime, and for being able to go outside and have little adventures. And I'm thankful for writing and all that there is to write and all that there is to imagine. I love writing. I love imagining and daydreaming up story ideas. I used to have this challenge that was 6 impossible ideas for breakfast. That was many years ago. And that was my way of kind of breaking myself out of what was a writing funk brought on by fear. And I decided I had to break that fear. And the only way I was going to break it is if I thought of 6 impossible ideas before breakfast every day. And I didn't always succeed, but most days I did. And I came up with all these crazy story ideas, some of which will probably never see the light of day, but I had fun doing it. And that's kind of why I'm doing this vlog. I'm doing it to challenge myself and to have fun, and also hopefully to entertain and to inform other people, so that way their writing journey is a better one. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week. here at The Truth About Storytelling. Thanks for listening again.